You don't marry a person. Sometimes, you marry a system. And at 31, Nicola Peltz is no longer staying silent about what that system felt like. Because what happens when love walks into a family that the world sees as perfect, but you start seeing the cracks no one talks about? What if the smiles were rehearsed, the dinners were tests, and the wedding wasn't just a celebration, but a quiet battle for control? People online keep asking one loud question: did Nicola break the Beckham family? But no one is asking the dangerous one. What really happens to a marriage when one last name weighs more than the love itself? This isn't about fashion. This isn't about fame. This isn't even about money. This is about what it feels like to slowly disappear inside a family so powerful that you forget where you end and their expectations begin. And tonight, we're stepping inside the story that was never meant to be told out loud. Because sometimes, the real drama isn't public. It's painfully quiet. And that silence? That's where everything started to fall apart. The first time Nicola stepped into the Beckham home, it didn't feel like walking into a house. It felt like walking onto a stage where the script had already been written, and she hadn't been given a copy. London, July 2019. No cameras, no press, just a quiet dinner that, on the surface, looked perfectly normal. Brooklyn had told her, just be yourself. But the way he said it didn't sound reassuring. It sounded like a warning wrapped in kindness. David greeted her with the kind of smile the entire world recognized. Warm, polite, controlled. The smile of a man who had mastered the art of being watched for decades. He asked about her flight, her work, her comfort. His tone was calm, welcoming, almost gentle. Victoria didn't move from her seat. She observed. When Brooklyn introduced Nicola, Victoria smiled softly and said, "We've heard a lot about you." A lot. Those 3 words hung in the air longer than they should have. Dinner conversations were light. Football, fashion, schedules, discipline, image, legacy. Nicola noticed something strange. No one talked casually. Every sentence sounded polished, like it had passed through a filter before being spoken. Then came the moment that changed everything. Victoria asked Brooklyn, "How long do you plan to stay in the US?" Brooklyn paused. Just for a second. But in that second, Nicola saw something she couldn't unsee. He looked at her before answering. Not for support. For permission. That was when Nicola realized, decisions here weren't personal. They were political. Later that night, when they were alone, Brooklyn apologized. Nicola asked, "For what?" He didn't answer. And that silence felt heavier than anything said at that table. The visits that followed weren't louder. They were subtler. But the pressure was clearer. Every time Nicola and Brooklyn spoke about the future, where to live, how to build their life, one invisible presence was always in the room. The Beckham family. Nicola began to understand the roles. David was the balance. The peacemaker. The one who made everything feel smooth even when it wasn't. Victoria was the structure. The order. The unspoken rules that had existed long before Nicola arrived. And those rules weren't explained. They were expected to be understood. At the end of 2019, during another gathering, Victoria asked Nicola directly, "Do you think you're ready for this life?" Not marriage. This life. Nicola smiled and said she loved Brooklyn. Victoria smiled back. But this time, the smile didn't reach her eyes. On the drive home, Brooklyn said, "My mom's just protective." Nicola nodded. But inside, a question was forming that she didn't dare speak. If a mother protects her son so fiercely that there's no space left for anyone else, where does the wife fit? Then came April 2022. Palm Beach. 3 days before the wedding. The Valentino dress hung in the fitting room like a symbol of independence. Nicola had made her choice. Quietly. Confidently. Then the door opened. Victoria walked in. She looked at the dress. Then at Nicola. Calm voice. Soft tone. "Are you sure about this choice?" The air changed instantly. Nicola said, "Yes." Brooklyn looked up from his phone. His eyes moved between his mother and his fiancée like someone watching a tennis match he didn't want to be part of. Victoria spoke gently about traditions. About how important the day was. Nicola heard what wasn't said. "Not your traditions." That evening at dinner, Nicola mentioned wanting the first dance to be private. Just her and Brooklyn. David nodded. Victoria placed her knife down slowly and said, "Family is always at the heart of moments like this." Nicola replied calmly, "This time, the family I'm building is with Brooklyn." Silence. Brooklyn looked down at his plate. That was the first line Nicola realized she had crossed. The wedding rehearsal was worse. The band was confused about the dance order. Victoria stepped onto the stage to clarify. Nicola stood below, watching her own wedding being rearranged. She stepped forward and said, "This part is for Brooklyn and me." Victoria turned and said in front of everyone, "We're just trying to make everything perfect." Nicola replied, "Perfect for who?" No one laughed. No one moved. That's when David finally said, "Let's stick to their plan." That night, Nicola and Brooklyn had their first real argument. Not about the dress. Not about the dance. About how Brooklyn didn't stand up for her. He said he felt caught in the middle. Nicola said she didn't want to become the battlefield. The wedding day arrived under Florida sunlight. Cameras, guests, whispers. Nicola smiled through it all, but she felt something strange. She didn't feel like a bride. She felt like someone trying to stay in the center of a room that kept gently pushing her to the side. After the reception, Brooklyn hugged her and said, "I'm sorry." Again. She asked, "For what?" Again, he had no answer. And that's when Nicola realized the wedding hadn't solved anything. It had exposed everything. When they returned to Los Angeles, she expected peace. Instead, she noticed something unsettling. Brooklyn's phone was never silent. Calls from London. Messages answered immediately. Conversations that ended with him coming back to the room quieter than before. She asked what was wrong. He said, "Nothing important." But if it wasn't important, why did his face look like that? Their disagreements didn't start as fights. They started as small questions. Can we decide where we live ourselves? My family is just concerned. At what point does concern become control? No answer. Nicola started feeling like she had been placed into a role. A very specific one. The wife who wasn't supposed to disrupt the system that had worked for decades. She tried to be quieter, more understanding, more accommodating. And with every step back she took, she felt herself disappearing. By the end of 2022, their first serious fight wasn't about money or work. It was about a trip to London. Brooklyn wanted to go alone. Nicola asked why she couldn't come. He said, "It's a family matter." She asked, "Then what am I?" Silence filled the room again, and Nicola realized something painful. In the most important moments, she was still seen as an outsider. That was when the real cracks began to form. The strange thing about pressure is that it rarely arrives loudly. It settles into daily life so quietly that you don't realize you're adjusting your entire personality just to keep the peace. By early 2023, Nicola began noticing a pattern she couldn't ignore anymore. Brooklyn wasn't choosing sides. He was choosing silence. And that silence was slowly becoming the loudest problem in their marriage. Some evenings, they would be having dinner in Los Angeles, talking normally, laughing even. Then his phone would light up. A name from London. A call he couldn't ignore. He'd step out to the balcony. 10 minutes later, he'd come back inside, different. Quieter. Heavier. Nicola stopped asking what the calls were about because the answer was always the same. Nothing important. But nothing important shouldn't change the entire mood of a room. That's when she started realizing something uncomfortable. The Beckham family didn't need to tell Brooklyn what to do. They didn't have to. Their expectations were already living inside him. One night, Nicola asked a simple question. If we ever have kids, where would they grow up? Brooklyn paused. Why are you thinking about that now? Because that's the future, she said. And I need to know if that future belongs to us, or to a plan that already existed before me. He didn't answer. That was becoming a theme. The more serious the question, the longer the silence. The media wasn't helping either. Articles started appearing. Headlines questioning the distance between Brooklyn and his family. Online comments accusing Nicola of pulling him away. Strangers speaking with confidence about a life they had never seen. Brooklyn told her not to read them. She said, "I wouldn't care if my name wasn't always in the middle of it." One afternoon during a video call with his family, someone joked lightly, "The Beckham kid has to grow up the right way." Everyone laughed. Nicola didn't. She looked at Brooklyn. He avoided her eyes. And in that moment, she felt something shift inside her. She realized this wasn't just about being accepted. This was about who would define the rules of her own marriage. The first major argument of 2023 didn't explode. It broke quietly. Nicola said she felt like she had to ask for permission to exist. Brooklyn said she was overthinking. She replied, I'm overthinking because you're underspeaking. That line stayed between them for days. Later that year, they flew back to London for a family occasion. The moment they entered the house, Nicola felt the familiar atmosphere. Polite, controlled, tense beneath the surface. Victoria greeted her with a composed smile. David shook Brooklyn's hand firmly, but the warmth felt measured, like everyone was carefully choosing how much emotion to show. Dinner didn't last long. The conversation circled around work, public image, commitments. Then Nicola made the mistake of speaking honestly. She mentioned wanting to plan their own schedule without outside pressure. Victoria looked directly at her and said, calmly but clearly, "When my son shows up somewhere, he represents more than himself." Nicola replied, "And when your son got married, he became more than just a son." The room went completely silent. David tried to soften the tension, but the truth had already been spoken out loud. After dinner, Brooklyn spoke privately with his parents behind a half-closed door. Nicola stood in the hallway, hearing muffled voices. No shouting, just firm, controlled sentences. When Brooklyn came out, his face looked pale. "I can't please everyone," he said. "I don't need you to please everyone," Nicola replied. "I need you to choose." He didn't respond, and that lack of response hurt more than any argument. Summer 2023 was when the distance became visible to the public. Brooklyn missed a few family events. No explanations. Just busy. The press started noticing. Words like rift and tension appeared everywhere. At home in Los Angeles, their arguments grew more frequent. Nicola told him she was tired of feeling like a threat to his family. Brooklyn said he felt torn apart. She asked, "What about me?" He said, "I'm trying." But trying without deciding was no longer enough. One night, after hours of talking in circles, Brooklyn said something that broke her heart. "I just want everyone to stop." "Stop what?" she asked. "So I can breathe." And Nicola realized something devastating. They were both suffocating. The only difference was she had nowhere left to step back. By late 2023, their marriage had entered a phase where nothing was loud anymore. Just quiet exhaustion. They lived side by side but carried different fears. Nicola was afraid of disappearing into a structure that wasn't built for her. Brooklyn was afraid of losing his family. Between those two fears, love was being squeezed from both sides. Headlines exploded when Brooklyn didn't attend an important public family event. Nicola read every article. For the first time, she didn't feel defensive. She felt tired. Because what the world called rumors were simply the visible result of a battle that had been happening privately for years. Then came the phone call. Brooklyn hung up and said, "They think you're pulling me away." Nicola asked quietly, "What do you think?" He didn't answer immediately, and that hesitation felt like a crack running straight through her heart. Their conversations were no longer about solving problems. They were about surviving them. Nicola began to ask herself questions she had avoided for too long. If this continues for 5 more years, who will I become? A wife who smiles in public but feels invisible in private? A name attached to Brooklyn, but no longer her own person? She realized something frightening. You can sacrifice to save a relationship, but you cannot disappear to keep it alive. And she had already started fading. By the beginning of 2024, something had changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. The arguments had stopped. And that scared Nicola more than anything that had happened before. Because when couples stop arguing, it doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it means both people are too tired to fight for the same thing anymore. February, Los Angeles. Brooklyn received a short call from his father. No small talk. No pleasantries. "We need to talk. All of us." Nicola looked at Brooklyn and, for the first time in months, she saw something clear in his eyes. Not confusion. Acceptance. Like he had been waiting for this moment longer than he realized. The meeting took place in a quiet house in Beverly Hills. No assistants. No cameras. Just 4 people sitting in a room carrying years of unspoken tension. David sat across from them, hands folded calmly. Victoria sat beside him, posture straight, eyes focused. Brooklyn sat in the middle. Nicola beside him. No one knew where to begin. David spoke first. He talked about family. About the years of sacrifice it took to build their name. About protection. About keeping everyone close. Nicola listened carefully. Then she said something she had rehearsed in her mind for months. "I understand protection. But protecting someone shouldn't mean removing another person's space to exist." Victoria replied immediately, No one has removed anything from you. Nicola held her gaze. Then why do I feel like I need permission to make decisions about my own husband? The room felt smaller. For the first time, Brooklyn interrupted. Mom, I'm 26 years old. Victoria turned to him softly. I know, but you're still my son. Brooklyn swallowed hard and said the sentence that changed everything. And I'm Nicola's husband. Silence filled the room like heavy air. David didn't scold him. He didn't argue. He just watched his son with a long, thoughtful look and said quietly, You know there will be consequences. Brooklyn nodded. I know. The conversation lasted for hours. Calm voices. Painful honesty. Nicola spoke about the dinners where she felt observed instead of welcomed. The trips she wasn't included in. The constant feeling of being treated like a disruption instead of a person. Victoria pushed back, saying she only wanted to keep the family united. Nicola replied, United doesn't mean everyone shrinking themselves to fit. For a brief moment, Victoria went completely silent. Then she said something that revealed more than she intended. You don't understand what this family had to give up to get here. Nicola answered gently. I didn't come to take that away. I came to build my place in it. Two truths. Neither wrong. Neither willing to bend. When the meeting ended, there were no hugs. No resolutions. Just honesty laid bare. In the car ride home, Brooklyn said quietly, I don't know where this is going. Nicola replied, I just needed to know where you stand. He held her hand tightly, but she could still feel fear in that grip. The weeks that followed were strange. His family didn't call as often. The media kept speculating. Brooklyn grew quieter, but in a different way. Less torn. More aware. April came with a major family gathering in London. Brooklyn didn't go. This time, there was no excuse. He simply said, I'm not ready. Nicola didn't celebrate. She didn't feel like they had won anything. She only understood one thing clearly. Every step forward they took as a couple came at the cost of something falling behind. One night, they sat on the living room floor in silence, lights off, just the street glow coming through the window. Brooklyn said he was afraid of disappointing her. Nicola said she was afraid of losing him. They both laughed, a tired, worn-out laugh that sounded more like relief than humor. That was the moment Nicola realized something important. There were no villains in this story. Just people loving in ways that couldn't exist peacefully together. Slowly, their life began to change in small ways. They spent more time in Los Angeles. Less time checking phones. More time doing simple things, cooking, walking, sitting without needing to explain themselves. Nicola stopped trying to be the perfect daughter-in-law. She started focusing on being herself again. She didn't speak badly about his family. She didn't defend herself publicly. She just held her boundaries quietly. And surprisingly, that made some people angrier than any argument ever had. Because boundaries don't scream. They simply refuse to move. Her relationship with Brooklyn's siblings remained complicated but human. Moments of warmth. Moments of distance. Nothing dramatic. Just real. With Harper, the youngest, Nicola stayed gentle. She never wanted a child to feel like they had to pick sides in a situation built by adults. One evening, Nicola saw Brooklyn sitting silently after a call with his family. He wasn't crying. He wasn't angry. He just looked still. And she understood his pain wasn't about choosing. It was about never wanting to choose at all. She told him something she meant deeply. I'm not asking you to walk away from anyone. I just don't want you to walk away from yourself. That became their new understanding. Their real vow. By mid-2024, life wasn't a fairy tale. It was quieter, more honest. They weren't happy in the glamorous way people imagine. They were happy in the way that lets two people breathe in the same room without pressure. Some days still felt heavy. Some memories still hurt. But they no longer allowed those feelings to pull them apart. Nicola realized she didn't need the world to say she was right. She just needed Brooklyn to turn to her and say, let's go home. Because now, home wasn't a last name. It wasn't an image. It wasn't a brand. It was a choice they made every day to protect the small, fragile space they had fought so hard to keep. Before you decide who was right, before you pick a side, pause for a second and ask yourself something uncomfortable. What would you do if love placed you between the family that raised you and the person you chose to build a life with? Because this story was never about headlines. It was never about dresses, weddings, or social media rumors. It was about something much deeper that most people will never admit out loud. The silent pressure of expectations, the weight of a famous last name, and the quiet fear of losing yourself while trying to keep everyone else happy. Nicola didn't scream. She didn't expose. She didn't attack. She did something far more controversial. She set boundaries. And sometimes, that's the loudest move a person can make. So now we want to hear from you. Do you think it's possible to marry into a powerful family and still keep your own identity? Can love survive when loyalty is constantly being tested? And most importantly, was this ever really about drama, or just two people trying to breathe in a space that felt too small? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read everything. If this story made you see celebrity families in a different light, hit that like button. And if you want more deep dives into the stories behind the headlines, the quiet tensions no one talks about, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Because sometimes, the real truth isn't loud. It's hidden in the silence between the people who love each other the most.